Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So, we're back with the same sad story about this young girl who died in a classroom fight. And so, recently, they came up with this conclusion. So, there's no video. I guess that video has been pulled, or either it just is not working, it's damaged. So, South Carolina fifth grader in school fight died of natural causes. No charges will be filed. But wait a minute. There's more to the story. So this is by a Danielle J. Gross and Elizabeth LaFleur. And this story is really sad because officials, South Carolina schoolgirl died of natural causes. And there's the mother. She's very upset. So this is Walter Borough, South Carolina. Law enforcement officials announced Friday that a fifth grader, her name was Renaya Wright, and she died days after natural causes. Okay. So no one will be charged in the 10-year-old's death. So, of course, there was an ongoing investigation about it. So they're ruling it out as natural causes. But the family's not really feeling comfortable with that decision or that conclusion that they're making in Renaya's results. But Renaya's family disputed the results of the weeks long investigation after she fought with another student March 25th in an elementary school classroom and complained of headaches. Renaya died in Charleston Hospital 2 days later. So we definitely know from that point on that something happened in the classroom before that fight. And it was also said that the teacher was there and she was present in the classroom. So there's some unanswered questions that the family still has. Frustration on this issue has grown in 3 weeks since Renaya's death as her family and the community members await more answers, which I'm thinking there should be more answers because it doesn't sound right. We already know, okay, Renaya, she probably does have something, but most definitely the death was triggered during that fight. And whatever happened in that classroom, only the students and the teacher or whoever was present in that classroom know. And they can't get any answers. And so it goes on to say that Duffy Stone, the solicitor of the 14th Judicial Circuit, was the first to speak on Friday morning at a press conference to address Renaya's death, appearing with a coroner and a sheriff of Colton County. Investigators said it took weeks for working with a team of medical professionals to finish forensic tests and provide a complete picture of the case. So Stone said that he met with a forensic pathologist and others who work with Renaya while she was at the Medical University of South Carolina. So he said that those doctors found Renaya had died of natural causes related to a congenital medical condition called arteriovenous, arteriovenous. Okay, so it's a malformation formation, so it's abbreviated as AVM. So slap fight. Okay, Fulton County Sheriff R.A. Strickland described the altercation at the Forest Hills Elementary School as a slapping fight, like slap fight. So he said that Renaya was involved in an altercation for 5 to 10 seconds on March 25th, and there was no evidence that the fight was connected to her death. But we noticed that she died right after it, right? How could the fight not be connected to her death? Okay, so they are trying to rule it out as something that was already of natural causes. And we know most definitely she was still living before the fight, but right after the fight, now she's not living. So it definitely triggered it. Colton County, this is the mother, Renaya's mother, and she's very disappointed and upset, and she's not really buying this story. And the family isn't, and the community members aren't either. So Colton County School District Superintendent Franklin Foster, speaking Friday afternoon after learning law enforcement investigations finding called the altercation an incident that happened between them where it was a scuffle and that there was some slapping and some pushing and some shoving. So teachers stepped in at least twice throughout the day to warn both students about their behaviors, Foster said. So the other student involved in the fight has been placed on an alternative learning setting or in an alternative learning setting. Okay, so why is that? That's another question. That other student's placed in an alternative learning setting. Well, obviously something happened in that classroom and they're not really, really getting into all of what was really going on. And from what I read in a previous covering this story before previous, that with this altercation that happened, the girl was bullied. So I'm wondering, were there other altercations that also were contributors of all of this? These are unanswered questions, and that's probably how the family members are feeling. They're probably asking these questions at random themselves. So it goes on to say that the other student was involved in the fight and has been placed on an alternative learning setting and will not return to Forest Hills Elementary for the remainder of the semester, Foster said. They won't say who the student was, and they're not giving any names. And I'm sure maybe the family and the parents know. And there's some reason that these family members and its community members and people do not feel comfortable about this. So they said that the teacher was in the classroom when the fight had happened and pulled the two girls apart within few seconds of the start of the fight. So no one from our staff was reacting to anything except the science and truth, said Maj. Jason Chapman, one of the lead investigators on the case. So following the altercation, the teacher solicited help from the assistant principal who was nearby. According to the investigators, the assistant principal removed Renaya from the classroom following the fight and walked her to the front office before retrieving the other student from the classroom and walking her to the front office. So Chapman said that at the time, neither student showed any signs of injury, and Renaya did not complain of headaches until about 10 minutes later. Of course, 10 minutes later after having a slapping fight. So apparently she must have been hit in the head or slapped in the head hard enough that it created her this pain where it triggered the headache. So authorities said that Renaya had a history of headaches, of course, but to have a fight and then die a couple of days later after it very well probably triggered the death. So if it was going to be something that she already had pre-existing, that fight probably, just made it quicker, or the reaction to trigger it so that she would end up dying or succumbing to that what she already was dealing with. So it says since 2017, she's had these headaches and had been to see a doctor for the symptoms 13 days prior to the school fight. Okay. So Strickland said that the school resource officer was on campus when the fight had occurred. So this is Forest Hills Elementary, the school. It says Ayers Corner Road, home of the Cougars Cubs. Okay, so there's a lot of people that are not really feeling good about this whole outcome. So family disputes the investigative findings, and I don't blame them. I feel like there's still some unanswered questions. That's my opinion. And so I could see why the family members are disputing it. So speaking on behalf of Ramaya's mother, Ashley Wright attorney Margie Pizarro said that she believed that there was more to investigate. Exactly. I believe there was a lot more to it. And they're not saying, and they're protecting teachers and the staff at the school and don't want to say, and they don't want to give up the true information of what was going on. And like I said, in these classrooms, there's no cameras. So that's another reason. There's only cameras on the outside of the school, cameras like in the hallways of some schools. But on the inside of the contained classroom, there's no cameras. So Pizarro said Wright hired her own private investigator to interview students who were at the school when the fight had occurred. So she said private investigator interviews revealed an extensive history with a particular student over the past 2 years, calling Renaya names, bullying her, invoking violence. Exactly. So that's the reason why they sent the kid to another learning setting, and it was called alternative learning setting. So this student has probably been, like what I said, a problem prior. This has been happening, and who knows what else has happened before. This might not have been the first altercation, and it just was, it just was told that this was an altercation because the girl actually died from this one. So that's probably why the girl was complaining of headaches. Who knows? The other kid probably has been bullying and slapping and hitting on her. And so the student interviewed in a private investigative setting said that the student in question earlier in that day made comments about wanting to fight Renaya, Pizarro said. So Pizarro also said that the private investigators finally show Renaya was put into a headlock and punched in the head several times and thrust into a filing cabinet and a bookshelf before a brick-sized object fell on her head. Now that sounds enough to make somebody like a little girl, fifth grader of her age die. I could see that happening. So all while the substitute teacher stood by the other students and were left to intervene, she said. And it was a substitute teacher? And the substitute teacher is probably not really aware of everything that's going on and all the bad actors in the classroom. And yes, I said that. There's a few kids that will take advantage of substitutes sometimes because the regular teacher's not there. And they'll take advantage and they'll hurt other kids, or they'll talk back to the substitutes, or they'll treat the other kids, harshly, that, what they couldn't do when the regular teacher is there. And so sometimes that happens. But the other evidence suggests that Renaya was the primary aggressor. So they're saying Renaya was the aggressor, of course. Like it's her fault that she died. That's what it's sounding like. They're trying to make it seem. Both in the March of 25th fight and in prior instances with the same student. So it's the same student. Okay, so Chapman, Renaya was probably defending herself. She was getting bullied and she was defending herself. So she probably was standing up for herself. And she did the best that she could to stand up for herself because nobody was stopping this other child, is what it's sounding like. So Chapman said that the student saw Renaya get up from her seat and walk across the classroom and punch the other girl in the back of the head. And that sparked the scuffle. And the other student put their hand on Renaya's back and head, and she was reared into the bookshelf near the teacher's desk, Chapman said. So the item on the bookshelf, including dust marks, it says dust marks were taken into account to show that Renaya's head had never hit. Okay, so they were dusting the area to see, so that's during the investigation, to show that Renaya's head never hit the furniture, Chapman said. So Renaya had rare congenital condition. Investigators said that there were no signs of external trauma and Renaya's body immediately following that fight. Okay, so the pathologist conducted tissue tests to determine whether there were any internal trauma connected to the fight. So those tests did not show any evidence of that altercation contributed to her death. Due to that test and the results, no charges have been filed in connection with Renaya's death. Authorities said that Renaya's hemorrhaging was a result of a birth defect. Oh my gosh, a hemorrhaging? A birth defect that is not related to the fight. Okay, so this child has a fight, and all of a sudden she has these headaches and she starts hemorrhaging. But now they're saying all this is connected, and this was something that was before the fight, and it was already happening, when it really wasn't already happening. She just had this defect or this congenital thing, but all of a sudden she's hemorrhaging. When you're hemorrhaging, something had to trigger that, right? So she has this fight and she dies a couple of days later. Then it's even said that she was picked on and bullied by this student. They removed the student from the school. They're protecting the student and they're protecting the substitute because she probably saw something, and maybe that substitute, it may not be completely the substitute's fault. Whose the fault is the school not alerting the substitute that that child was combative with that particular student. So a lot of times when substitutes come to classrooms, you don't know what you're going to get, what kind of kids are going to be in there. And you don't know if the kids have, like certain behavior issues. You might expect some of that, but if they don't put down a note, this child is, these two kids shouldn't sit next to one another because, keep an eye on them. If you have any trouble, we'll have some extra support. A lot of times these schools don't support, in that sense, they don't support the substitutes that are coming in there. It's like you're coming in a classroom with blinders on. And so if they knew these kids had a history of having combative contact with one another, they should have had written a note that these kids are to be separated, or either pull one of the kids from the classroom for that day until the original teacher comes back. But if this is an ongoing thing and the teacher knew this was happening and wasn't reporting it, then that's a whole nother issue altogether. But this hemorrhaging that it's talking about, it took place about, it said, it can take place about any time, Stone said. So the fight did not have anything, they're trying to say this, that the fight didn't have anything to do with the passing of Renaya, and it did not have anything to do with the rupture. And so an AVM is a tangle of arteries and veins, which, according to the National Institutes of Health, can hamper the delivery of oxygen to the brain, oxygen, or the spinal cord because of abnormal blood flows. They can range from a fraction of an inch to more than 2.5 inches in diameter. So people who have them are born with them, said Dr. Sharon Webb, a vascular neurosurgeon with Bon Secours, St. Francis Health System. And I know where that is because I'll be honest with you, I was out in South Carolina and I know the health system out there because I was there, and I didn't really feel like it was that great. An incident happened to a relative of mine where they did an operation on her they weren't supposed to do out there, and then the doctor comes in and has her to sign a form so that she can't sue. But of course now, she signed the form, but she shouldn't have. But she's not here, so anyway, I'll go on with this story, but I'm not really buying this story. So, what happens because a hemorrhage, something can trigger a hemorrhage, even if, let's say, for example, like what these doctors are saying, all of this may be true, that this girl had pre existing injuries or, she had a pre existing condition. But definitely, if it was going to happen, it was going to happen. But to have a slapping fight and to hit someone in these sensitive areas, knowing that this girl had all of this going on, wouldn't you say that that fight triggered it? And if this kid was always gunning for this girl and had a history of being combative with that child, she dies a couple of days later. How could you rule it out as it was natural causes? I wouldn't buy that story. It just doesn't make sense. So it goes on to say what happens is that the arteries pump blood into the veins, which are made to handle the pressure she says. So they become distended, especially if the brain can then rupture and bleed, she said. So an AVMs are rare, of occurring in about 1 in 100,000 people, Webb said. So AVM's rupture symptoms can include seizures, bad headaches, weakness, and comas. So Dr. Akila Turk the third, a neurodiologist with Prisma Health Upstate. Upstate. Hmm. I remember that hearing that too. Said that AVMs are challenging because they aren't usually discovered until they rupture or cause a problem such as a headache, seizure, or trouble with vision or speech. And they are fatal about 10% of the time, Webb said. So, what would cause the rupture? What would trigger that? That's the question I have. Even if this girl already had this, okay, what would trigger it? I would think most definitely a fight would trigger it because if the girl already had this condition and you're slapping her and hitting her in the head and things are dropping on her head, yeah, whatever's wrong with her, yeah, that's it. It's gonna trigger it. So this right here says, I miss my daughter. Family members said Renaya was an active child, healthy and happy, showing no signs of serious medical issues. So outside the sheriff's office, Ashley Wright spoke of her and the memories of her daughter who loved basketball, church, and her family. So she said that hearing the autopsy results was the first time that she learned of the congenital defect. So I miss my daughter and I'm not able to hold my daughter again or kiss her, and I'm not able for my child to go to the prom, her first dance in middle school, and she ain't gonna be able to give me no grandchildren, Wright said. So I just want the answers that haven't been given since the day one. So the morning of the fight, Wright said that Renaya seemed healthy. So just a few days earlier, she was enjoying her brother's birthday party that could have played all night. And she could play all night, she said. So the pivotal question is, did she know about the vascular issue they had found in this autopsy? The answer is no, Pizarro said. So Pizarro said stress and high blood pressure stemming from the scuffle could have easily been contributing factors that led to Renaya's death that authorities are trying to downplay. Exactly. I believe that's what's really going on. So, conflicting views on bullying. So, Ashley Wright said that there had been a long history of bullying involving particular students involved in the classroom in that fight. So, she said Renaya would come home to her and complain about a girl, but did not want her mom to complain to the school out of fear of the teasing. So, still, Ashley Wright said that she had went to school to make a formal complaint at least once. Okay, so also she spoke with Renaya's teachers by phone several times, she said. So Chapman said that the sheriff's office has no record of testimony of prior complaints or inquiries about Renaya being pulled prior to her death, okay, or bullied prior to her death. And so they're making it seem like there was no case of bullying and there was no prior incidences of fights and altercations with this particular child that resulted in this incident that is happening now. So Foster said that there was no evidence in the records that Wright had brought up issues to the school before. So can you imagine that? They didn't even make a record of it. So she probably was a mother that was concerned. She knew there was something going on, and she had made many requests to talk to the teachers. And some schools to the full extent, they kind of are really lackadaisical and nonchalant about issues. They sometimes will, records can disappear too, believe it or not, especially when people don't want to take the blame for something they know that could have been a factor in a person's death. Because the fear of going to court and then realizing that, that you can be held accountable for the negligence in the classroom or the office, maybe the school could get sued. Schools get sued a lot for incidences like these and other incidences. There's a lot of incidences schools get sued for. And so a lot of times parents think the school is for them. The school isn't for you unless you send your kid there because the schools get money based on how many kids show up. And the school isn't for you unless they're trying to cover up something, which this clearly sounds like they're trying to do. And I have to be honest. Um, Nobody's trying to, take responsibility over this. And so that's what it looks to me. In my opinion, I'm just going to say allegedly this whole thing that supposedly occurred at the school, it looks as though that someone's trying to, hide something, most definitely, and there's some unanswered questions. So what do you think about this whole situation? It's really a touch and go, it's a touchy topic, and you see the family pictured here. They're not buying it. I'm not buying it either. And I think there's a lot of unanswered questions. I believe that it will be either really take a long time for them to continue doing the investigation, or they just want to drop it because they don't want to be held responsible for somebody's negligence or not adhering to those requests that this child was a problem in this classroom prior and they didn't intervene soon enough is what it looks like. But with that being said, I'm gonna let this video go until the next video. Like, comment, subscribe. This is out of US Today, and thanks for listening. The article, rather, was out of USA Today.